So, really excited to now at the right time instead of the wrong time, bring on the next guest that we have today I said guest again, didn't I? Bring on the next speaker that we have today. As I kind of mentioned, Dan is somebody that I really look up to as really a thought leader in the technology space within franchising, and I'm really excited to hear him speak again. Mr. Dan Monaghan's to the stage.
Good morning, everyone. It's real special being here on the 10-year anniversary, and especially with this theme, Back to the Future, because this morning we'll take a little bit of a time machine ride forward and back, and as we think about technology. Do they gotta do the? We'll just skip through that. So here's some of the brands that we have in our portfolio. But when Lane first asked me to do this session, he said, can you give us an update since 2018 when you did that session? And we talked back then, for those of you that were there, we talked about AI, machine learning, virtual reality, augmented reality. We talked about the metaverse before there was a metaverse. We were talking about virtual reality back then. But a lot has changed since then, right? There's been the whole cryptocurrency craze. There's been the NFT run-up, last year that got a little bit crazy. There's been, Zuckerberg changed the name of the company from Facebook to Meta, just to position the company for this next wave of the internet. Billions of dollars have been spent laying the foundation of this next wave of the internet. So this morning we're going to talk a little bit about something called Web 3, sometimes called Web 3.0. They're actually a little bit different, but we won't get into that this morning. We'll talk about how Web 3 is different from Web 1 and Web 2. We'll talk about blockchain, NFTs, the metaverse, and how franchisors are beginning to dip their toes in the water and position themselves for this next wave of the internet. And then we're going to come back to today and look at some of the ways some of these technologies are actually beginning to disrupt business models and industries as we speak. Now, I'll apologize in advance. This might be a little bit like taking a sip from a fire hose, because there is a fair amount of content, but the cool thing is they're recording this so you can listen back to it or share it with your team as well. But I think you could ask the question, what's the point at looking down the road ahead for things that might not affect us for the next year, 2, 3 years? And for some of you that remember when you first learned to drive, your driving instructor might have talked about the importance of peripheral vision. And talked about focusing your eyes as far down the road as you can towards the horizon, because that allows us to see more of what's going on around us. Whether it's the moose darting out onto the road, or the kid on the tricycle, or the car swerving ahead in the lane in front of you. As business leaders, when we look to the road ahead, it helps us recognize the opportunities and the threats that might be closer at hand. So we'll do a little bit of that today, but there's also value in learning from history. Mark Twain once said that history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. And when we look at how technology is adopted and how disruption happens, there's a lot of patterns that we can begin to see that can help us interpret where this will go in the future. So what I'd like to do just to start things off is take you on a bit of a time machine ride back to 1995 when I started WSI. It was a couple of years before Google. And there was the same kinds of confusion back then, like this whole www, World Wide Web. People didn't really know what it was about. And this is an interesting little video clip that will capture a time that some of you will remember, and some of you will just maybe find interesting. This is back in 1995.
Americans own a personal computer. If you're one of them, you can now glimpse the future with nothing more than a modem, a phone line, and a few dollars a month.
Oh, that's
that little mark with the A and then the ring around it?
At?
See, that's what I said. Katie said she thought it was about.
Yeah. Oh.
But I'd never heard it. I'd never heard it said. I'd always seen the mark, but never heard it said. And then it sounded stupid when I said it. Violence at NBC.
Just what is this main artery of the information superhighway?
Every business, no matter how large and no matter how small, will be on the internet in the year 2000. It's the primary way that people will look up information. It will replace the yellow pages as we know it today.
Are a lot of people just getting on to the internet because they feel that they have to get onto the playing field, so to speak?
Well, it's very hip to be on the internet right now.
There it is, violence at NBC, GE.com. I mean,
Well, Allison should know.
what
do you
is
say to that,
internet
Allison?
anyway?
Internet is that
Massive computer
right,
network.
the one that's becoming really big now.
What do you mean? That's big. How does one? What do you write to it like mail?
No, a lot of people use it and communicate. I guess they can communicate with NBC writers and producers. Allison, can you explain what internet is?
No, she can't say anything in 10 seconds or less.
I'm afraid that if I subscribed to something like internet,
You would really be hooked.
I would get hooked and I would never, spend time with my family. Am I weird?
Does it bother you at all that these are all people that you don't really know? I mean, that everybody's signing on and having these conversations and whining together or griping together or whatever, with people that I don't know if I.
It is group therapy of the 90s.
Well, as I mentioned, I have no desire to be a part of the internet because I feel like I'm so inundated with information all the time that I don't want more. Don't you ever feel like it's just constant bombardment?
I don't know. I guess the thing I'd resent
information?
most is I would resent that, at least when you're home, if the phone rings, you have the option of not answering it. On the internet, people can send you messages all the time people you don't even want to hear from.
So that video is funny and kind of backwards, but in some ways very prophetic, right? Like what they were anticipating in terms of how it would change the way we would communicate with each other, the way it would change our lives and the way we interact socially. But those days were what we called Web 1.0. And back then it was really just about putting websites online. And it was a company or a person would put up a website and people would surf the web and look at that content. And it's interesting because back then there wasn't really anyone on the internet. And so we used to actually buy round the world tickets with British Airways. They had a ticket at the time where you could stop as many times as you wanted as long as you kept going east. And so we would go from city to city, country to country, trying to educate the world about the internet. And I remember trying to simplify it for people, and I'd be speaking to an audience of business people, and I'd say, how many of you have a fax number on your business card today? And most of them would raise their hand. And then I'd say, how many of you had a fax number on your business card 5 years ago? And there'd be almost no hands. And then I'd say, in the next 5 years, we're all going to have an email address on our business card. And they'd look at me with blank stares, like just in disbelief, like that's not me. That doesn't make sense. And so, of course, we know what's happened since then. The world has changed significantly. This is actually McDonald's website back in 1995. So that's when the franchising began to adopt to Web 1.0. And of course, the internet has changed dramatically. This is an example of a web strategy map we've done for a client at WSI, and the website is still at the center of it. But there are so many other technologies and elements that feed into that website. And so the world we're living in today is what we call Web 2, Web 2.0. And this really came about 10 years ago as social began to come onto the scene. It was actually even before that when we were no longer just surfing the web, but we began to contribute to the content on the web. Platforms like Wikipedia came about, and we started to leverage the wisdom of the crowd. It actually became more valuable or more accurate than Encyclopedia Britannica, right? So all of a sudden now we were contributors and curators of that content. And then the social platforms came out, like Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, et cetera. And so we were now not just surfing the web, we were contributing to the web. And so it was a community, it was user-generated content. But the interesting thing about Web 2 and where we live today is that there are these central platforms that own everything and control everything. And so, for example, that business model, whether it's TikTok or Facebook or whatever, they own our information. They're selling our privacy, they're selling our information, they're selling our attention to the tune of about $600 billion a year. And in exchange for that, we get free stuff, right? Free services, we get to surf the web. Well, all that is going to significantly change as we move into this world of Web 3. And what is Web 3? So a big part of it is that it's about decentralization. And I'll explain how we do that. That's through blockchain. So no longer does just Zuckerberg own it all. It's actually distributed, and we'll talk about that. Because of blockchain, we don't rely on trust anymore. Like right now when we do our online banking, we have to trust that bank. We got to trust that their database is going to take care of our privacy. But with blockchain, we don't require that same kind of trust anymore because it's fully transparent. It's a highly immersive experience. And some of you, you might remember, when I last spoke about this, I talked about how addictive our phones have become, right? We look at our phones, we look at these screens, but imagine if we could actually go into that world, immerse ourselves into the world, how addictive and transformational that will be. And that's what Web3 is going to be about with the metaverse and virtual reality. Oh, there is also the semantic web, which we're not going to talk about this morning, but the semantic web is a really important thing you may hear more about in the future. That's where the web comes to life. It becomes intelligent. It becomes sentient, where it's no longer just humans consuming content, but it's machines consuming content. And the web is actually communicating machine to machine, which is going to be very impacting in the world. But to understand Web3, we have to understand this concept called blockchain. And I explained this back in 2018 in more detail. And if you Google my name and Google and add blockchain, you'll see a little 5-minute clip from Springboard where I explain what blockchain is in 5 minutes. But I'll give you a really simple overview here to say that all the sites or companies or platforms, whether it's Facebook, whether it's Amazon, whether it's your bank, they all have a central database at the center of it. Even Uber, like any kind of company or platform. But as we move towards blockchain, what blockchain does is it decentralizes everything. So there is no longer a central database that's owned by anyone. The database is shared by all the people, all the nodes in the network. So it's spread across the network. And it's fully transparent, so everyone can see it. It's incorruptible because there's nowhere to hide. It's all fully visible to everyone. So what blockchain allows is a whole bunch of new things that we could never do before. And these are the buzzwords that you're starting to hear about. Things like cryptocurrency, NFTs, smart contracts, decentralized autonomous organizations, or DAOs, DeFi, decentralized finance, and then, of course, the metaverse. So we're not going to talk about all of these today. We'll talk about a few of them. But let's start off by just recapping the concept of cryptocurrency. So right now, there's over 20,000 different cryptocurrencies, but the granddaddy of them all is Bitcoin. And we talked about that a little bit in 2018. Back then, Bitcoin was trading at about $6,500 a coin. It's gone as high as 65,000. Now it's just around 20,000, give or take, just under 20,000, I think. And what Bitcoin is a store of value. It's like digital gold. And you'll hear about how people mine Bitcoin. And you can think about it kind of like mining gold. Every year we mine gold and we add to the world's gold supply. Well, with Bitcoin, every year miners are mining new coins and they're adding them to the world's supply of Bitcoins. But here's the difference. Today there's about 19 million Bitcoins, but there will never be more than 21 million. The system is hard-coded to have a limit of 21 million. So that is one of the things that drives the value of Bitcoin. It drives the scarcity because there never will be more than that. Now, who knows what the future is? Kathy Wood at ARK Invest thinks that Bitcoin's going to go over $1 million a coin. Some people say $500,000. Some people say it'll be replaced by something else and will cease to exist. Everyone has their own view on that. But one of the things that's important about cryptocurrency is it allows us to interact with each other outside the bounds of financial systems, outside the bounds of governments, outside the walls of any country. So it's a really human-to-human form of payment. And we can pay in micropayments as well, which we're going to hear a lot more about in the future. So that's one of the benefits of cryptocurrency. The other thing that's really important to know about Bitcoin is that it's fungible, which means if I have a dollar bill in my pocket and you have a dollar bill in your pocket and we trade dollars, We both have exactly the same thing that we had, right? Because a dollar is a dollar is a dollar. And the same as a Bitcoin. Every Bitcoin is the same. They're not unique. They're fungible. Well, a number of years ago, a young Russian programmer named Vitalik Buterin from my hometown, University of Waterloo, he invented this thing called Ethereum. He said, why do these tokens have to be dumb? Can't they be smart? And what could we do with them if they actually became smart? And so you can almost think of it like a Bitcoin turned into a CD-ROM. Because now we could actually what could be on a CD-ROM? A picture, a song, a movie, a program? Anything that can be digitized can be put on a CD-ROM, right? So all of a sudden these tokens became smart. And each token is unique. It's non-fungible. So let me give you an example. If you had a piece of artwork, and I had a piece of artwork, and we traded artwork, we would no longer have the same thing as we started with, right? Because art is non-fungible. It has unique properties. And each Ethereum coin, each one of these smart tokens, is non-fungible. And that's where we get this term non-fungible token, or NFT. Each one of these things is unique. And so it creates unique ownership of digital assets. Now, we've seen a lot of craziness over the last year, and some of you may have seen these things like this Bored Ape Yacht Club. How many people have heard of the Bored Ape Yacht Club? Just so we get a show of hands. Okay, so that is a collection of 10,000 of these different images. And the most expensive one sold for $3.4 million. My neighbor up in Canada, he lives across the lake, Justin Bieber, he bought this one for $1.3 million. That's Justin's Bored Ape. Okay, it seems really crazy when you think about that people are paying that kind of money for what looks like these digital images. And I was talking to Lane last spring, and he said, this doesn't make any sense to me. This is like people are spending incredible money on a JPEG. Like, it doesn't make any sense. So let me try to explain to you why people are spending money on, and I'm not going to justify the amount they're spending, but why would people spend money on these NFTs? And let's compare it to the physical things in our life, like artwork. So here is a Picasso that I have on my wall at home, and it's what's called a lithograph. And the way a lithograph works is that the artist creates a block or a plate that he or she prints a printout of. So the design is on the block or the plate, and then they print it. And what gives this lithograph value is two things. Number one, Picasso's signature in the corner, which authenticates it. And number two, this number in the left corner that is number 2 out of 50. So that shows the scarcity. There's a limited edition run of 50 of these, and that's the second one. And so it's those two things of authenticity and scarcity that give artwork its value. Of course, who the painter is and the market price of those things as well. But we're able to encode authenticity and scarcity with NFTs. Now here's another Picasso I have, and this is what's called a proof. And in a proof, this is less valuable because there is no number in the bottom left corner. I think it's nicer aesthetically, but before the artist begins the limited run, what he does is runs a proof just to make sure the block is printing correctly, and that's what that one is. Now you might say, okay, fine, I get it with artwork because I can hang that on the wall. By the way, I can make a photocopy of that one, that first one. I could frame it up beautifully and hang it on the wall. It wouldn't have the value because it doesn't have those things of scarcity and authenticity. But you might say, yeah, but I can hang this on the wall, so I get that with artwork, right? But what can you do with a JPEG, or what can you do with an NFT? Am I going to stare at it on my computer and enjoy it on my phone? Well, here's another wall in my home that has an NFT. And that is, some of you are familiar with the Samsung Frame TVs, and there's other products like that. But we can actually enjoy digital artwork the same way that we would enjoy regular artwork. And I can enjoy that as long as I want. I can sell it off whenever I want to sell it off, right? And now, I like it aesthetically. You might not like it aesthetically, because everyone has a different view about what beauty is and what's beautiful. I mean, if I were to say to you, what do you think of the aesthetics of that? How beautiful is that? Do you want that hanging on your wall? Well, to someone, it's worth over $200 million because it's an original Picasso. But it's not just about the aesthetics, how beautiful it is, because a lot of people would say that's not a particularly beautiful painting. So NFTs allow us to do all kinds of things that we could never do digitally before. Now, how are franchisors beginning to use NFTs and dip their toes in the water here? And how might you want to think about some of the applications? Obviously, digital art is one way of thinking about that. Collectibles. So my daughter loves to go to Wendy's, and when we're going through the drive-thru, she wants the kids' meal. So she always wants to check in the bag before we drive off to make sure that the toy is in the bag, right? Because she collects whatever that collection of toys are, the dragons or the whatever. And but imagine instead if she scans a QR code on the side of the bag and downloads a digital collectible, right? Just like Pokemon cards, collecting things. And Burger King did just that. They created what they call the Keep It Real meals, 6 million boxes with a QR code on the side. And they've gamified this. So they partnered with a bunch of celebrities, and depending on what NFT the person has, you can chat with a celebrity. It unlocks the opportunity to have a phone call with a celebrity. You can unlock free burgers, up to a year's supply of free burgers. So there's all kinds of things we can do with collectibles. McDonald's launched a McRib NFT that created a lot of buzz. Papa John's launched this whole collection of these hot bags, as they called them. One of the interesting things they did is they advertised it as an environmentally friendly NFT. So you may have heard a lot of this controversy around Bitcoin and blockchain and all the environmental aspects of that. It's so highly consuming of energy. But we're not. That's going to be a thing of the past in the not too distant future, because there's all kinds of ways that blockchain is changing to become very environmentally friendly. In this case, they minted it on a blockchain called the Tezos blockchain, and so it's a green blockchain. So anyhow, that's the spin that they put on it. Let's take a look at something that's interesting about NFTs. You can actually, if you're the creator of an NFT, you can actually build in royalties that as that is sold on the secondary market, you actually get a royalty, right? Which is kind of interesting for us as franchisors to think about, right? And let me give you an example of how it works in the real world. So a few months ago, this is a Mickey Mantle baseball card that sold for $12.6 million. Now that baseball card was created by Topps, the company that makes baseball cards. How much do you think Topps got out of that? They got 5 cents. When they sold it in 1952, they got 5 cents, and they'll never get any more out of that, because the whole secondary market they don't tap into. But with NFTs, we can get 8%, 10%, however we set it up, in a royalty back on the secondary market, which is a lot of potential. Loyalty programs. I'm sure many of you as franchisors have loyalty programs. Just 2 weeks ago, Starbucks launched the Odyssey program, which is, now Starbucks has the largest loyalty program in the world. 1 in 10 Americans is part of their loyalty program, and 2 weeks ago they launched an NFT-based program. So you can download, collect art, through it, or different collectibles. You can unlock experiences, so tastings. You can take a trip to the Starbucks plantation in Costa Rica. So there's all kinds of things. In fact, they've got this massive community that they've never unlocked before. And you'll hear a lot about how NFTs, community, is an important part of NFTs. And so they're actually unlocking access to this community through their NFT program. Authentication of products. In a lot of industries, counterfeiting is a big problem, knockoffs. If you've ever been to China or Hong Kong or Turkey, you know that some of these knockoffs can be as good as the originals. Like in quality, they can be indistinguishable. This is a picture of my wife in front of a store in Turkey where they're advertising genuine fake watches, which I thought was kind of funny. But I mean, it's a big problem in a lot of industries. Well, with blockchain, what we can do is scan the product and verify on the spot its authenticity. Trace it right back to the original manufacturer. In this case, wine. Wine counterfeiting is a huge issue. It's a $60 billion a year industry. Now, do you really know what's in that bottle when you're drinking it? Well, this allows us to trace it right back to the vineyard, right back to the field that the grapes have come from. So it's very powerful. In fact, The European Union has just announced last month that they're putting in place a blockchain program to verify the authenticity of products across all the EU. Any kind of, many of the physical products that we use every day. So that will be an interesting application of NFTs in the future. Memberships. If you have any kind of memberships as part of what you do or could have, some of you might have heard of Gary Vee's Fly Fish Club, where he launched an NFT. So it's a membership-based restaurant. And you have to have an NFT to be able to dine in the restaurant. So he launched these things for about $5,000 per NFT. They sold out within a few hours, and then the price started ramping up on the secondary market. But now there's NFT-based restaurants that are popping up across the country. So this is going to be a trend we'll see, not just in restaurants, but anywhere where there's memberships, clubs, etc. Charity programs, CSR programs in your organization. So Aziz Hashim from NRD Capital wanted to make an impact in Ukraine. And so he partnered with some artists, photographers, artists, and came up with a whole collection of NFTs that would raise funds for the Ukraine. And I can tell you, as chair of the IFA Foundation, we're going to be watching for how franchisors are using NFTs in fundraising so that in our Franchising Gives Back program, we can shine the spotlight on some of this and highlight the impact that's being created. Now, there's something you may have heard of called DAOs, Decentralized Autonomous Organizations, and it's another way of using NFTs. It's where a whole bunch of people come together with all these kind of like micro NFTs, and they pool their funds to do something much bigger. And a couple of months ago, there was this group that raised $47 million. So a DAO raised $47 million to buy out one of the original copies of the US Constitution. There's only 6 copies available in the world today. Now, it turns out they were outbid by a billionaire, but the world was shocked that a DAO, like almost on a moment's notice, could raise $47 million. Now, think about how we might be able to use that in franchising. You know, what does the future of DAOs look like in franchising? It could be multi-unit operators that are running a DAO to fund the expansion within a brand. It might be people buying out master rights to a franchise. I wouldn't be surprised if in the future we're going to see DAOs that buy out franchise systems. DAOs that are competing with private equity to buy a franchise system, right? Now there's a DAO already, and there may be more than one, but there's one called the Fries DAO in franchising. They've raised $5.4 million, and they're buying out QSR restaurants with that. Restaurant News asks the question, are DAOs the new restaurant franchising fundraising model? You know, who knows? But it's very possible to raise large sums of money very efficiently using DAOs. Now let's just pivot to the metaverse. And you know, since we last talked, there's been a lot has gone on, right, with this whole metaverse thing. And last year, Zuckerberg spent over $10 billion himself, just his company, working on their version of the metaverse. Since we last spoke, there's been all kinds of new hardware and software and infrastructure to allow this metaverse to happen. You might remember when we last spoke about this, I talked about how Ready Player One, the movie by Steven Spielberg, is a great example of what is possible and probable in many ways in the future. In fact, it was critical to Steven Spielberg. He wanted that movie to be prophetic. He wanted to ensure that anything that was in that movie was either possible with the technology of the time or would be possible with what was already envisioned. And so if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend you see it if you want to get a glimpse of where the world is going. Not overnight, but that's where the world is going. Apple launched their Reality OS, which is an operating system for developers to build metaverse applications, to build virtual reality applications. Apple is coming out with a headset, VR headset, augmented reality glasses. So this isn't just a Facebook thing. This is now all the major tech players are getting into the game here. Now, one of the questions that's often asked is, where will the metaverse be? You know, now, of course, Zuckerberg would love it to be in Horizon World. That's Facebook's version of the metaverse. Gaming platforms like Roblox and Fortnite, they'd love to be the center of the metaverse. And then there's these virtual worlds that have already been built, like Decentraland and the Sandbox. They're expecting to be the center of the universe. People are buying up virtual real estate in those worlds with that expectation. The reality is, it's probably going to be all of those things. I mean, it's kind of like asking the question, where is social today, right? Like, is it Facebook? Is it TikTok? Is it Instagram? You know, it's all of those things. And that will be the case with the metaverse. There'll be multiple, virtual worlds. What will be different in the metaverse is that we're actually able to carry our things, our digital assets, from world to world because of blockchain. So, humans often indicate their status based on the clothes they wear, the jewelry they have, the cars they drive. And in the metaverse, there'll be those same kinds of status symbols as people kind of can carry those things with them. Gucci sold a bag recently for $4,100, a digital NFT bag. Now, that same bag in the real world is $3,400. But that was in Roblox. Somebody bought it for $4,100, and they can now wear it with their avatar wherever they go and anywhere in Roblox. Okay, so and in the future, they'll be able to take that from world to world. And they can resell it, right? And so let's talk about how franchisors are positioning themselves for the metaverse. Now, it's still very early stages, and it's hard to know exactly how every company is thinking about it, but we can get some clues. So one of the ways we can get clues is by looking at trademark registrations. So when you register a trademark for your business, you select certain classes, and those classes are the areas, like the sandbox you get to play in with that trademark where you're kind of protecting that area. And there's a lot of different classes, but what franchisors are beginning to do is expand the number of classes associated with their trademark. So we can look at what McDonald's has done here. They've added class 9, 41, and 43 to the McDonald's trademark, which means that what they're anticipating doing is the ability to purchase things in the metaverse at a McDonald's location in the metaverse, and the food arrives at your doorstep in real life, right? So that's how they wouldn't have anticipated that when they first registered the McDonald's trademark. Now, other franchisors are thinking about new trademarks and different names. So Panera has registered the Paneraverse. Okay, so that gives us a clue on how they're thinking about that. And the classes that they're associating with. So trademarks are one way of thinking about it. There's virtual storefronts already being built in some of these areas. So I can tell you, this is in Decentraland. This is what Coach has done. This is an incredible, highly immersive retail experience. And with any set of VR, you can just check this out. And so companies are going to begin setting up virtual storefronts in the metaverse. Wendy's says, no, we're not going to go into someone else's metaverse. We're going to create our own. So that's the Wendyverse, which is what they call it, and that's their version of the metaverse. What about domain name registrations? Well, Disney recently got into a lawsuit with someone who registered the name Disney Metaverse. And they were able to use trademark law and the ICANN registration process to be able to pull that domain name back, right? But there's a whole series of new domains that are coming out for blockchain where it's not that easy. You can't do that in the same way because there aren't those same protective mechanisms. So there's .eth, .crypto, .nft, .metaverse. So these are some of the new domain extensions with blockchain. And you may be surprised how many of your brand's names are already gone. How many of your products and services, even your own personal name, are already locked up. So it's like the early days of the wild west of the internet where people were locking up .coms for every name in the dictionary, every possible company, and they're squatting on those domain names. That's starting to happen in blockchain in preparation for the metaverse. And so it's just something to think about. In fact, Franchise.com, that ended up selling for almost $20 million. Right? So people are starting to position themselves for this next leg of the journey here. Some franchisors are starting to leverage virtual reality in their offering, like right at home, taking seniors on trips around the world through virtual reality, and they're not the only ones doing that. Other franchisors are looking at how they can use virtual reality for training. And with what's going on today in the labor markets, right? Like the FAST Act in California, AB 257, all the wage pressures, inflationary pressures. We've got this turnover, and so anything we can do to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of our training is something to think about. And this is what McDonald's is doing. So any way you slice it, the metaverse is still very much in its infancy. It's very much early days. It's kind of like where the web was back in 1995. And it may be highly disruptive, but those disruptions aren't happening yet. And so let's just take a look at a few of the things that are beginning to disrupt the business models and companies today. So let's look at how blockchain is beginning to make an impact. So you might remember back in 2018, I said, when you think about where blockchain is going, I wouldn't want to be any platform company or platform-driven company. So I wouldn't want to be Facebook. I wouldn't want to be a bank. I said I wouldn't want to be Uber, right? Because that's a central platform that can easily be disrupted, and it's already happening. There's a company called Drive that is a blockchain-based rideshare program. So that 1/3 that Uber is taking out of the fees is now being split between riders and drivers. There is no central platform anymore. It's all out on the blockchain. And it's interesting, they're franchising this, so it'd be something interesting to watch. Let's think about how automation and AI are affecting various industries. Again, when you've got these kinds of wage pressures and inflation, businesses are thinking, how can I automate some of these functions? How can I do more with less? Especially if your business is highly labor intensive. Again, it's not always what you're planning on doing, it's what your competition is planning on doing. And this is not new. I mean, automation has been pioneered for years in, for example, the quick serve restaurant business, and everyone's been trying to figure it out. But other people are building it from the ground up. And it's not restaurant companies, it's technology companies coming from the outside. This is a company called Mesli, which is a fully automated restaurant. They have 10,000 different options. It's all designed by a Michelin star chef. It's less than $7 a bowl. And they can serve 75 people an hour. Now think about the unit economics on that. With a small footprint like that, no people, I mean, that can be very disruptive. And again, this is not the restaurant industry that's getting into technology. This is a VC-funded technology company from Stanford that is getting into the restaurant business. A lot of these forces come from the outside. Let's look at another trend, the human cloud, the AI-assisted human cloud. And there's that expression that if you can do your job from anywhere, someone anywhere can do your job. Right? So we think about how we can outsource things elsewhere, but what about our own job and our own role? And one of the interesting things, the reason we say AI-assisted human cloud is when we start applying business process automation tools and we start applying AI, we don't require the same skills from people that we once required. And we can start pushing things out to the edges of the universe, or the edges of the economy. So for example, we used to have servers in our offices, right, for our mail and our web and all that kind of thing. But now we've got the cloud. And the same thing is happening with people. We're pushing it out to the human cloud. I can tell you one of our businesses, Recruiting in Motion, which is a staffing and recruiting business. In that industry, the vast majority of research and candidate sourcing is now happening on the edges of the human cloud. It's happening overseas, it's happening wherever. Because if you can tightly document your process, there are great business process automation tools that you can use. I can also tell, and by the way, that's not just to reduce costs. That's nice, but it's the scalability. It's how rapidly you can scale your business when you're using the human cloud. Our digital agency business, WSI, there is a huge amount of outsourcing and offshoring going on in the agency business. And many agencies, their target is to have 3 people offshore for every 1 person they have onshore, because they can standardize the way a lot of these things are being done. Just a simple example, and by the way, there's so much going on in AI, like Google's DeepMind is now being cascading across so many different tools and industries, that AI technology. So for example, if you wanted to write, a lot of people don't actually know who's doing their writing. Like who's writing your copy? Who's doing your SEO, right? And what some companies are doing is you can download the top ranking stuff from Google, download the blogs, the white paper, whoever's ranking at the top of Google, feed that content into an AI-driven tool like AnyWord, and that cranks out, it identifies all the patterns of the content, all the semantics of it, and cranks out fresh content that you can then feed into something like Grammarly to polish it, and you now have new blog content that is pre-optimized for Google. Now, someone from anywhere can do that, right? And so at WSI, we're helping businesses access the human cloud and actually bypass a lot of the traditional agencies that they might have used. What about design? I mean, we think of that as uniquely human, right? Creating, design. Well, the New York Times 2 weeks ago came out with an article, and they said for the first time ever, an AI-generated piece of artwork won an art competition, right? That's not Google Images. That is a uniquely created piece of art. And there's products, companies like DALL-E, Midjourney, and there's others out there, but where AI is being used to create art. And I'm not saying that tomorrow your web pages or sites or logos are going to be designed by AI. All of this is directional. This is where things are moving. My daughter, she's 11, and she goes to art class, and she loves to draw things. And I told her about this product, Midjourney, when the article came out. I couldn't quite figure it out myself. I showed it to her, and within an hour, she figured out how to use Midjourney and started cranking out these beautiful dragons and puppies and princesses, and here's a design she created. Again, that's not Google Images. That is a unique design that there is no such thing anywhere else in the world. Right? Now, if she can do that, and we're in the early days of this, where is this going as we begin to move, continue to move down this road? So, important principle here, remember we talked about learning from history? An important principle here is that disruption usually comes from outside. Uber was not pioneered by the taxi industry. Airbnb wasn't from the hotel industry. Self-driving cars were not pioneered by the automotive companies. It was like startups like Elon Musk, right? And so most of that disruption is going to come from the outside, maybe from your competition that's already in your industry, but also maybe from outsiders outside your industry. The phone that changed the world was created by a guy who didn't make phones and said he never would, Steve Jobs. And yet, when he came out with the iPhone that changed the world, all those leaders in the phone business, the cell phone business at the time, were totally disrupted. And so there's a Hemingway book called The Sun Also Rises. And in that book, there's a character named Mike. And Mike is asked, how did you go bankrupt? And Mike said, I went bankrupt in two ways, gradually and then suddenly. And Silicon Valley legend Tim O'Reilly says it's the same with technology. What appears to be happening gradually around us, all of a sudden happens suddenly. And if I showed you this device years ago and said it would change the way we work, the way we live, change the world, you might have been skeptical. I would have been skeptical. And when we look at these clunky things, and hear about this thing called the metaverse, it's reasonable to be skeptical to say, to what extent is this thing really going to take off? Until we look at the AR glasses that Samsung is coming out with early next year and that Apple's coming out with. Until we look at the smart contact lenses that are already being tested. This is not like a future thing. This is already happening. People are wearing them. Until we look at the brain-computer interface technology being pioneered by companies like Neuralink, Elon Musk's company. What's happening with the metaverse appears to be happening very gradually around us, but it may just all of a sudden happen suddenly. And so I guess in closing, I encourage you to continue to look down the road ahead. Put your eyes on the horizon from time to time and expand your peripheral vision, because you might begin to see things around you. You might begin to see opportunities for you or for your business that others can't see. So thank you.
Stay put just one moment. So Dan, has come back to present this. And I have read so many articles trying to get the sort of the foundation and the what's what. And I know I'm looking at faces out there. Everyone is in the same boat. Dan is the only person I've ever met who could distill it in a way that it's digestible. He did such a good job 3 years ago that we made him come back. You get really nervous when he's talking that, like, everybody knows something that you don't know, and all your domains are going to be gone and other things. But these kinds of presentations that are forward-thinking and based on disruptive technology are a Springboard treasure, and they're intended to give you a first glimpse of what's happening next. Dan, we are so grateful for your willingness to come back each time and bring us back. We'd like to induct Dan Monaghan into the Springboard Hall of Fame, and we'll do it right now.
First, I want to give thank you for everything, as always. This is still coming from someone who doesn't know how to attach a document.
Right. You can step off, Dan. Thank you. Great. Thanks. Zach mentioned earlier, there she is. Shane Evans, could you join us on stage, please? So we said it yesterday, and it's, people always say something nice, a sentence nice about someone. You can always, even me, people can find a sentence nice, but it doesn't really do justice to the kind of contribution people make and how much of their own personal time and effort that they put into an event like this that is, not directly related to your general pocketbook. Shane has come every year. It's either back-to-back or has an overlapping day with her own conference. Other people tell me, no. I have a scheduling conflict. Shane turns up. She could be in 2 places at once. She's like Flash Gordon. She can get across country. But she's been always available, not only available, initiating calls, going through the program, trying to find where the holes are, telling us what emerging franchisors really care about and what they don't care about, and what sounds like sales and what's usable and digestible. And then, of course, that we have people present it that can explain it like Dan did this topic. So Shane, we are so grateful for your help, and we really want to induct you as well into the Springboard Hall of Fame for 2022. We're so blessed to work with such amazingly talented people. We're so blessed that there are so many people in this room and have come and trusted us on this event with no program until last week. It's a great testament to, I guess, your trust in us and our ability to deliver this kind of content. So that's what makes it better every year. This is a sharing. This is like blockchain, right? Brad and I know, well, Brad knows nothing. No, we know very little together, but the fact is we bring lots of folks in that we know something, and they're generous, and they share it with you. And let me just get a round of applause for all of our Springboarders for 2022.
I was going to say one comment. Lane and I love throwing Springboard. It's awesome. Zach and Ryan have joined us, and we really do this. So people go to us, why do you have to schedule it during my franchise conference, my franchisees conference? We are normally going to be the last week of September, so don't schedule your conference around that date. You don't realize how many people have said that to us. So we're giving you a little heads up. This is normally the time slot we're going to choose.
And lastly, Dan mentioned all the properties. So we know, we have Springboard, we have Unconference, we have all our firms, all with large presence on the internet. Follow us. We push tons of information. We shared tons of information and pictures and video, real-time video from this event. You should be communicating and interacting with us in those real-time posts, and you should see what the world's seeing when we try to reveal it to everybody. So take out your phones if you get a minute and follow our events, follow our companies. We put a ton of information out there for you. We always hope people read it and interact with it. Tony, we're ready for the next set? All righty, everybody. We're going to pull the walls closed? Okay. I'll take a short break, and we'll see you back in here. Once again, Dan Monaghan.